If it's law you're talking about, I don't think there is any direct attraction to law. But I think it's always the omnipresent, omniscient sight, sound, smell of law, if you are from a family of lawyers, which makes a difference in that category. In my case, I never thought of law, I think, consciously. Definitely at least not till school leaving, and possibly not even till my undergraduate in economics. Certainly in school, it was all other things which interested one, and one was always trying to be very much focused on the homework or the work of the day.
Where did you do your schooling, sir? Sorry.
St. Columbus,
Okay.
all my 11 years.
Right.
And I was a very good student. In fact, I always joke that the best years of my life academically have been in school, because everything after that has been downhill. I stood first in India.
Wow.
And since you can't do better than that, therefore everything subsequently has been downhill. But in those days, law was not thought about in school as a taught subject, so it was very distant in our minds. But certainly, I saw my father getting dressed and going to court. I had the books of law all around me. My grandfather was a lawyer, so that does make a difference. So somewhere in the subconscious, it is there. But just to end on your question, ultimately I think there was absolutely no pressure in my case at all. In fact, there was an anti-pressure, if at all, to join law. Nobody forced me to. It happens by a process of elimination. You think at times that you will not do what your father is doing. You examine other options, and you end up by a process of elimination. And it's the same with my two sons, where I have at least scrupulously avoided. But by a process of elimination, one is a lawyer and the other is studying law.
But where exactly did you do your law from, sir?
I had a somewhat peculiar trajectory, because I did my school in St. Columbus. I did my BA in Economic Honours from St. Stephen's. And while I was at St. Stephen's, I got admission into Trinity College, Cambridge.
Right.
But there is a gap of time before which the admissions come and the term there starts. Okay. So in the meanwhile, I also joined the Law Faculty of Delhi for about 2 months, but went straight from there to Trinity, Cambridge. And then I stayed on there and did my undergrad and then my PhD also from there, and came back after about 6.5 odd years.
That must have been a fairly defining phase in your life, when you were abroad in college on a campus, and then going from being an undergrad to being a postgrad and then
yes. Doctor. I was always a good student, so one would have thought that I wouldn't change much. But while being a good student, I remained a complete introvert right through my school.
Okay.
I remained broadly introvert even in an outgoing, vibrant college like St. Stephen's. The defining moment clearly was that one became more outgoing when we went abroad.
Right.
Partly question of survival, partly because we were in a strange context and a strange climate. But certainly I found that I became more confident and more extrovert after my start at Cambridge.
What were the options those days abroad as opposed to in India? Like today, more and more students prefer staying abroad because you can teach, you can work in law firms there. So what made you come back to India?
In my case, it was always a fixed time emigration. I never in my mind thought that I'd stay there. I think it's just the way I think, the way I looked at things. In fact, during my PhD, I also taught at St. John's College, Cambridge, to supplement my income and to keep my foot in academics. So I could easily have stayed there. I was also doing my dining terms at Lincoln's Inn. So there was a reason to stay there. But the moment I finished the PhD, I didn't have a second thought. I'd always intended to come back, and I came back.
How has it been being the son of such an eminent lawyer? Do you think life has been tougher or easier for you?
It's clearly both. I think it's not correct to say that you are born with a silver spoon and you progress with the platinum system. Clearly, it gives you an edge in the initial years. Clearly, it gives you a push. It gives you a backup and infrastructure. You have a library. You have a certain amount of resources. All those are definitely pluses. But this is a very unforgiving profession, and very early on, if you do not work hard enough and are not able to prove yourself in a few cases, the system rejects you. So I think the fair thing to say is that there is an initial push, like a rebuttable presumption in your favor, but you have to make sure that it's not rebutted.
Was it a big leap when you come back after doing your PhD? Was it a big leap to come back to India and then start completely afresh with a system you've probably not been familiar for a while?
As I said, it's a little peculiar trajectory because one, I had always this great fear of the unknown, because technically I hadn't studied the nitty-gritty of Indian law. So there was always that feeling, which was misplaced, as I learned soon, because it's really a vocational profession. You learn on the job, but you had that theoretical fear. Secondly, I had done what 99% of persons, including my father, who was a doctorate LLM from Harvard and a doctorate from Cornell, dissuaded me from doing. He said, people don't do PhDs in law, and not necessary, you should get into practice. So curiously, it was my mother who said that, if you are interested in things, this is the time in life to do it. Later on, you won't get time. So in those years, and in Cambridge, 50% of those who join a PhD program don't complete it. Of the balance 50% who do, statistically, they take 6 to 7 years to do it. So there's always a fear of the unknown there as well, that you're wasting your time, your colleagues are getting ahead, and there is no real direct tangible nexus between a PhD and success in the profession. So that's a very lonely furrow. I was lucky to get my PhD in 3 years plus. But there was clearly a great amount of apprehension. And the third set of apprehension set in soon after I came here, because I was looking around for a senior, and barring 1 or 2 chambers, I found that there are very few systems here which actually encouraged a junior-senior relationship. So very few chambers to join. And the few which were available were clogged up, were full, with names I'll not take now, but they were full up. So I decided to be with my father for about a year and a half, and then I remained on my own. And those first years, the fourth major problem I felt was that Delhi in particular, unlike Mumbai and Calcutta, had no slot for the intermediate counsel at all. You would have people who would come and be happy with your drafting and your hard work and the fact that you could put a point across, but they would say that you either had to be there at the side of the senior, or you had to be the advocate on record with a wakalatnama. The only reason I went into counsel work was with a very genuine, tremendous fear, humongous fear which I have to this day, of procedure. I'm always scared about not being filing process in time and being caught by the client or forgetting a date. So for that reason, I never went into the on-record wakalatnama field. And that was a very difficult period for 4 or 5 years when you had some good work and good clients which you couldn't hold. Either you had to, the client thought there was either a senior, if he was paying for one, or there was the advocate on record. Why should you pay for an extra chap in the middle who's like a Stepney?
Do you think that system has somewhat changed today?
Substantially. Over the years, the 4 of us, I think, in particular, who worked our way through the High Court on this fashion, and then the Supreme Court. But there were not more than 3 or 4 people at that time. But now it is definitely much, much easier. There is a greater appreciation and awareness of a person who assists a senior counsel. There is a greater willingness to, after a certain degree of seniority, to brief a person who may not be a senior. And I think also there is a great amount of trust. I think in those days, in Delhi, I am talking particularly in Delhi, where there was no tradition.
Right.
Being a district court as late as 1966, they did not have a tradition of this kind. So the practice was based on the principle of distrust, that if you were an intermediate counsel, you'd walk away with the advocate on record's client. I think that has changed clearly now. And you see the result of very, very many good young people who are progressing in that intermediate stage.